So you basically have a good understanding of the concept behind it. If we do have a call, and it depends on the severity of the call, but if we do have a call like that and we have 5 people on scene, so typically how that would actually, the apparatus that would be responding, call like that would have a fire engine and would have one of those rescues. But depending on the severity of the call, immediately the next closest engine, like you said, is starting to be moved up or staged towards Indiantown, because we want to stay within our crisis response time. We don't want, any delay unnecessary. So we don't want them sitting in the station waiting for a call to come out in Indiantown, and now you have to dispatch them. We want that unit to already be relatively close. So yeah, having that system, that next unit, and then also, we talk about the Tropical Farm Station because that is the closest one, but we have 32, which is out in Hope Sound. We have the Palm City Station. On multiple occasions, I've had to call all of these apparatuses to come out and help me. So it's actually very common. I would say, multiple times a week, you'll see an engine, whether it be Tropical Farms, Palm City, in the Indiantown area, providing service. And sometimes the residents may not see it because they are staged. They might get close enough and then wait there because they're waiting for me to radio in and say, okay, we've mitigated this call now. We're available. You can start heading back to your quarters. So depending on the call type, but without a doubt, a system is necessary to mitigate these type of calls. And that's just medical calls that we're talking about. The semi-trucks that come through there, the dump trucks, the bad MVAs, just the design of the roadways out there. Just motor vehicle accidents. Motor vehicle accidents that are out there. But yeah, there's just so many different things. The industry that's out there. We talked about hazmat. So the support that's necessary to mitigate those calls, it realistically cannot be done and provide the level of service that's currently being provided with one engine and 2 rescues on a volunteer basis.
Even if we have an automatic aid agreement, even if, mutual aid apparently is not as good as automatic aid, even if we have that agreement, that's gonna cost us. So let me ask this, and kind of spoke to it a little bit, but I wanna make sure that I am perfectly clear. When we're talking about training, the gentlemen that are on the ambulances and the gentlemen and ladies and gentlemen that are on those fire trucks, you talk about EMTs, paramedics. Is there a minimum? Does everybody have the same? Can you speak to that?
Rocco. Team member.
You're on.
Well, the minimum is the EMT, but every apparatus we have in our department has one medic on each truck. Some have multiple medics. So, and you see an engine or a ladder truck going down the road. Some still have the old label, it'll say paramedic queen or paramedic ladder. So all our engines have paramedics, minimum of 1, most of the times 2. And our rescues also have a minimum of a medic and an EMT, but most of them have 2 medics on the truck.
But at a minimum,
We have ALS equipment. Everything's ALS. You get ALS immediate to your emergency.
Okay, what is ALS?
Advanced life support.
Okay.
So what that means is, I'm sorry, when you say the difference between an EMT
Right.
and a paramedic,
Right.
EMT is called basic life support, BLS.
Okay.
A paramedic is advanced life support, ALS. ALS, the difference maker is when you're actually on that cardiac arrest. We talk about giving cardiac medication. That between the CPR, between the heart monitor, and between the medication, that's what saves lives. That's what a paramedic is capable of doing because they have a year of additional in just medical training. An EMT can do the CPR, but they can't do the advanced airways, and they can't do any kind of medication. There is a huge difference. Every truck in our county, whether it's a ladder truck or an engine, has at least 1 paramedic on each truck. So we are advanced life support with every apparatus that rolls.
And we also have EMS captains, 4 EMS captains per shift that roll and come to most of the priority calls to intervene and help and assist. So we also have that as well.
but your point to your question was, at a very bare minimum, everybody is at least a firefighter and an EMT or paramedic. So they're cross-trained in both. The difference with a private ambulance company is that you're just getting an EMT or a medic. They don't have the firefighter background, which helps in situations where on a medical that it's, strange, they're in a tight spot or whatever the case may be. A lot of the private ambulance experience is in controlled settings or doing interfacility transfers where, yeah, you need the capability to, if the person has cardiac arrest in transport or whatever, but it's usually the controlled setting.
So, Matt brings up a good point. So Kevin, he's on many different calls out in Indiantown. And one of the big common calls out there are what he said, the MDCs, the vehicle accidents we have. And there is a lot of times where that rescue truck is the first on scene of that vehicle accident. And to his point, if they're just medically trained and they're not firefighters, they don't understand, one, how to recognize what's going on with the vehicle, they don't understand how to recognize the hazard, and more importantly, they don't even understand how to extricate the individuals safely from the vehicle because they're not certified as firefighters. But in addition, private EMS, that's for profit. We're not for profit. We're here for a level of service. Our tax dollars pay, everybody gets an equal level of service with us, and that we give them 100% in that quality. They work for profit. The way profit works is, if I can send a truck with 2 people to go help this individual out, I'm gonna send that truck. I could probably, 3 or 4 would be better, but I can pull it off with 2 at a bare minimum, because I'm gonna make this other truck available so they can capture the next call, and I can keep out any kind of mutual or automatic aid, and I'll capture as much revenue as possible. So we're not even talking about profit margins. That's what private EMS does.
Okay, and so if we have a private EMS and we have our one fire truck, if there was an automobile accident, it should be the fire truck responding along with the EMS, because each one has their own individual role, rather than either one could, in Martin County's situation, you don't necessarily have to have one to have the other in order to have the experience.
Correct, because we're all duly certified.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good, thank you.
Good?
And to be specific to Indiantown, what you currently have out there are 4 paramedics and 3 EMTs. So when they say 7 personnel, they're not specifying whether they're EMTs or paramedics. What's currently out there are 4 paramedics and 3 EMTs.
And most of our captains today, what Kevin used to be, are paramedic certified.
And back to the separation of the systems versus having a fire rescue combined system, there are many times where we have to pull personnel off the fire engine onto the rescue. So that's where that dual certification and training comes into play. If they're separate systems, in theory, you're not really gonna be able to pull that person off and utilize them. You can't pull a firefighter off of a separate system onto an ambulance, onto a private ambulance. They're not trained in it.
Right, it doesn't cross over. Okay, good, thank you.
All right, you want to take over the ISO? Then we want to move into the ISO rating.
Yeah, so, I know in the FAQs, you specifically names Mike Morash, who represents ISO, comes in to do the ratings. We were just re-rated 2 years ago, and we went from a 4 to a 3. And it's a very, you can't, undersell how much goes into that ISO rating. It's a tremendous amount of things. It's not just, it's water supply, it's dispatch, it's, make sure all your safety inspections are up to speed, your apparatus is there, you have backup apparatus, response times, et cetera. I mean, it's a whole litany of things. So we've reached out proactively to Mike just to get an idea of what would happen if this were to come to fruition and you guys created your own fire department, and what would that do to the rating? And he said it would go away unless they were able to duplicate the service, which you can't duplicate the service without an automatic aid agreement. If you're relying solely on mutual aid, and it's referenced multiple times in this FAQ, that's not duplication of service, because you're delaying response time significantly. And, to truly duplicate the service, you're gonna have to have your own fleet services with multiple backup apparatus, and then, the personnel on scene and everything else. Just on a structure fire alone, there's no reference of a ladder truck. You need to have an aerial device to properly mitigate a structure fire. And per NFPA 1710 specifically, you need to have 15 personnel on scene within a certain amount of time. So if you only have 7 people, you can't even respond to a structure fire appropriately. So,
In reality, we would have 3.
what's that?
Well, if it was just, the
Your
way
mom.
Okay.
the way he wrote this,
Yeah.
yes, you're right. He's saying he can do 3, and just to
Oh,
let you know about your consultant, so I had a conversation with a consultant, I think a couple weeks ago, and we talked about, we call it assemblage as far as a structure fire. And his response, it was disturbing, for somebody who comes from the industry, it was very disturbing with his response, because his response was, first off, most of the homes are under 2,000 square feet. Just discrediting homes under 2,000 square feet, which I just kind of pushed through that part. Secondly, he goes, you don't have that many structure fires out there. There can only be, you know, a few in a year. I'm like, so what happens with those few? He goes, we can handle it with one engine. I'm like, you can't even meet your assembly requirements. Doesn't make any sense. Well, what we can do is we'll put fire sprinklers in all of the new homes. I'm like, okay, so you're gonna put fire sprinklers on new homes. What about all the existing homes? Well, I don't have an answer for that. So he's given information to Howard, which is sharing with your board, and it's disturbing with how he just discredits everybody and doesn't, if you're going with the mindset of going up to a structure fire, and they're right, eventually the fire will go out, because it will consume all of its fuel, right? So if you're going with the mindset, I'm gonna send one truck to that house fire, well, you're not talking about saving lives. You're just talking about watching it burn down, and then we walk away. If there are people that have died inside, they weren't prepared to save anybody because it doesn't work that way. And they're not even talking about that. And that's why when I say we're passionate, that's where we're passionate, because that's what we train to do. And I don't want to get too far off by it, but Christian, I wanted you to kind of articulate the special operations, because this is kind of his wheelhouse. Christian was a battalion chief for special operations, which is, I'll let him go into it, because I'm going to start taking it from him. Go, Christian.
So with our special operations, they're based out of Hope Sound, and there's 5 different disciplines that they're all trained in. Vehicle machinery rescue, which is if we have a large scale motor vehicle accident, we have to extricate the patient. We're able to do that, and obviously with all the semi trucks and heavy equipment that roll through Indiantown, you would need this truck. We've been out there numerous times as well to help mitigate that. Confined space rescue, as we've been out to Bay State Milling, we've done confined space rescues from them. We do high angle rescue, which we train out at FPNL. We do multiple high angle rescues with them, as well as trench rescue, and we also have a dive rescue aspect that we do as well. So we cover 5 different disciplines just in the special operations sector that we do there. So there's, to get those levels of training, it's a long and lengthy process. And again, going back to what the hazmat said, not only are they operations level, but they are all technical certified. So that's an even higher level of training. So just a little bit about special operations, what they do with that is, you're not going to be able to get that.
So once again, if we were to have that automatic aid agreement, it would include that, but once again,
For a cost.
it comes at
Yes,
a cost.
That's right.
Okay.
And just to expound a little bit on it, so Kevin, let me tell you, Kevin has been on some really horrific calls out there, especially with vehicle accidents.
Yeah.
And what the special operations team does, so you have the fire station they have so much equipment for extrication. This team that he's talking about they have that same type of extrication equipment, but times 10. There's a lot of specialty equipment that goes with it, because some of these vehicles get so mangled, it's like tunneling into a vehicle to get to a patient to get them out. So you've never seen, and anybody will testify to it, you've never seen a vehicle get transported to the hospital because they couldn't get the patient out. Eventually they get out. But here's the part that they don't talk about. We have 60 minutes from the point of that collision to get them to the right trauma facility to actually to be with the right surgeon to save their life, right? This team affords them that ability to extricate them sooner than, I would say, that just an ordinary extrication. So they could be there for an hour, 2 hours of cutting them out to get them to the hospital, when we can get there and speed up the whole process between 15 to 20 minutes. That's the level of training that he's talking about, and that goes in addition to the level of training our people already have. And our people, they're not average at any of this. We just enhance the level of service that they have with the special operations.
Just to add, some of our most, and I was an ops captain with all ops guys, some of my most horrific accidents have been out of Indiantown.
When I say he's been on some disturbing stuff, because I've worked with Kevin and I've seen it, it's been pretty,
Well, I have to say, I got to thank you guys for doing what you do and the training that you have, because one of those was my son. Out on the grade out there, late at night, somebody came up on his tree. And they life flighted him to, Fort Pierce, and he would have died. He had 2 broke legs. I'm sure somebody probably knows exactly the call. It's been about 3.5 years ago. Broke his ankles, broke his legs, he had internal injuries, and they had to go in, and it was kind of, but he made it, and it was because of what you guys do and the training that you have. You guys have also responded to my grandmother when she was having a brain aneurysm. You responded to my father who was having a heart attack. So I understand all this, and I appreciate it, because it does pay off. It's paid off in my life, so I appreciate it. Please.
One other little thing I wanted to add on the special operations that's going to be important is even outside of the mutual aid and automatic aid agreements that would potentially be there, some of the industry out there such as FPL, but there's also been some different types of construction that's gone on. They actually, by their insurance, would require that we have an agreement ahead of time where they actually have to go out, either provide training, do an orientation, stuff like that. So that's even outside of a call response. They would have to say, there was some construction going out there at one point a couple years ago, where our special operations team had to go out there and meet with them on site. They had to go through their plan to say, if this accident occurs, this is what we'll do. They look at our response plan, we look at their response plan. So that's even outside of a real call, that's just preparation and training, and they're required to, before they usually get their certificate, to be able to commence with any kind of, any kind of construction or whatever might be in the industry.
Well, now, do they call you guys to say, we need this, and then they pay for that for you guys to come out and to do that for them? Do they pay you?
It depends what it is, it
Oh,
depends
okay.
who it is and stuff like that, so,
Okay.
it just, each one's a little different.
Okay.
But a lot of times it's not, they don't just do it out of, they'll call us and they'll be like, we're required before we can even start doing this is stuff that we're required to do, so it just depends on who it is that's doing it.
FPL, we have quarterly training with them. We have a long-standing relationship. In fact, we have training set up, I think, it's May. Because we go out there, and what it is one is being on the site, just because there's a lot of things about FPL, it's such a large area. You have to know areas that you can go to, you can't go to, what you can touch, what you can't touch, what is available to you for whatever type of call that you have. And it's a relationship that you have to have, because when time is of the essence, this isn't the time to figure out who's my point of contact, who can operate that piece of equipment. We need to know that when we get there, so decisions can be made in an efficient manner, and then we can make the difference. That's why it's so important to have that type of relationship with that type of industry, and we have that, so it's fortunate.
And we don't charge for that.
There is no charge for that.
Yeah, there's no, obviously it benefits both organizations, to have that preparation in place, so there's no fees there.
All right, so this is probably one of many disturbing things that he had written in this frequently asked questions. So he claims he can run 2 medical calls and 1 structure fire at the same time with 2 med units, if you're even staffed full-time, and a fire truck. That's what that said in there. It's absolute, he can't even take all of that station and run 1 fire call. It's impossible, you can't do it. But he's delivering this to the citizens, and it's this false sense of security, and we're afraid if we don't educate them well enough, that they may think, because look, if this isn't your wheelhouse, this isn't what you do for a living, you may think, oh, okay, fire truck goes to a fire, end of story. It's not like that. We have multiple trucks on 1 fire scene. So we talked about it. We have a minimum of 15 people on 1 fire scene. That 15, we have 2 fire trucks. We have 1 ladder truck. We have 2 rescue trucks. We have 1 battalion chief, and we have 1 EMS captain at a minimum. You can't even meet that with 1 station. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
That's an industry standard.
Okay.
So for the consultant to even say that is just outlandish.
Okay, having that much there is an industry standard, So we're not even up to industry standards with what we're proposing.
No, not even close.
No, and one of the other things that's gonna be important too is just with one fire truck and 3 individuals that are trained as firefighter, by the Florida statute and the fire administrative code, anytime you enter an IDLH atmosphere, which is immediately dangerous to life and health, you have to have what's called the 2 in, 2 out, means if 2 firefighters go in, you have to have 2 equally trained to save those should they become in trouble. So if you only have 3, you can't even technically enter a structure to put the fire out if you don't have the 2 additional out there to rescue you. So they would be against the Florida statute if they actually tried to do that.
So in reality.
So they would have to stay outside
So
until
in reality, that's not even, well, the staffing that we are proposing is just to show up to a fire and make sure that it stays contained and it doesn't get, so there's no rescue even, not even thought of in this because
No.
it's not.
Excuse
Well,
me,
just-
He's gonna fill that void with mutual aid, which we just kinda, I think we went through that already, is not
Okay,
gonna happen, because now you're talking an hour.
And it's
before
happened,
anyone shows
when I
up.
lived in
Right.
Palm Beach County in the 90s, Lake Park used to have its own fire department. They couldn't satisfy the 2 in, 2 out. This is the reason why they actually disbanded.
okay.
And they watched the house burn to the ground, and they had to wait for Palm Beach County to come in and help them satisfy their requirement for the state 2 in, 2 out. And the homeowner watched his house burn to the ground. About 2 months later, Palm Beach County took Lake Park over. So it's
excuse me,
Okay, that's good to know.
hypothetical situation, my house catches fire, my wife collapses from the smoke inhalation. I make it out. You guys, or their guys are on scene. Nobody can go in and rescue her?
No, they can, if there is a stipulation in the statute that says, if there is a known person in there, you have a real good, and you know they're in there, you can make entry without that safety team in place. But if it's not known, if you're just going, well, I'm not sure, but we need to check the structure, that's not considered known, so you would have to stay outside that
Okay,
atmosphere until more people arrive that were trained equally to satisfy that statute that says you have to have 2 outside waiting.
Thank you.
To go further into your point, they do a risk benefit when they get on that call, right? Risk benefit analysis. So if I'm gonna risk a lot, I better gain a lot. Now, we are trained a very specific way. We risk a lot. It allows us to risk a lot because of the level of training that we have. So we know where we can push the limits. When you have a company like this, I'm telling you now, they're gonna see it, you're gonna identify it. My wife is still in that house. They're gonna assess that house. They're gonna say, oh, it's about 40% involved. Nah, you know what? Not risking it, not doing it. Sorry, sir, but it's just too far gone right now. That's the response you're gonna get. I'm telling you, when we go in there, now there are times where it's fully involved. Obviously, there's nothing there. But what we're trained to do is, when we arrive on a structure fire, it's not that we're fixated on the house that's on fire and where the fire is. We're fixated on the area of what we call survivable spaces. It's the areas that are not on fire, that's where we make our rescues. And we have techniques of how we enter. We don't enter the front door in every house because it's a front door. We enter the points of ingress where we're able to go in there, make a difference, kind of seal off where the fire can go into that room, search that room, and if we know your wife is in a room, especially wherever she is, we know that we can go in there if the fire hasn't encroached in that area, shut it down, search it, and take her out that window. So there's techniques out there, but it takes a lot of training and reps, and that's all we do all year long is train both on medical and on fire. That level of company, what kind of training do you think they can have because of the type of calls they have and the amount of calls? They don't even have the time to get that training in because they're too busy running the calls that they have to run in that area. So it just doesn't make any sense.
Chief, also, just to back up what he's saying too, if you have 2 rescue or 2 ambulances that show up in the volunteer fire truck, you only have 3 fire personnel there. They're not cross-trained like that. Just to add to what you're saying, there is no cross-training. We have the cross-training, they don't.